Frozen 2 is the sequel to the smash hit Disney animated film from 2013, which was a huge surprise, I think, to a lot of people that it was a big hit, including Disney. I remember going into it knowing absolutely nothing about it beyond the one sentence synopsis that it was loosely based on the Snow Queen, and it had that trailer that I thought was kind of like, it was like this goofy slapstick trailer where it just showed like two of the reindeer and then Olaf, and it was kind of just like their antics. It was kind of Looney Tunes. I was like, okay, a new Disney movie, I guess. So I didn't watch the trailer really that got into the plot. So yeah. I recall in late 2013, I actually tricked two of my really close, my best guy friends into seeing it with me, because my girlfriend at the time, she had no interest in the movie. She was very wise to my antics. So she wanted no part of Frozen. And so what started out as a prank on my friends over a movie I thought would just be kind of like, all right, like another Disney, maybe it'll be as good as Tangled. That'd be great. It actually turned out to be a really great theatrical experience, a big surprise. Like, you can actually picture me and these two guys. One of them is this quiet, snarky man's man from New Jersey. The other is like a theater nerd who cannot get enough of like the really good music, like me. So we're sitting in the audience and like we're just getting more and more invested in this love story between sisters. And I thought it was such a cool subversion of the Disney formula, no pun intended. And I just consider the first Frozen just to be a fresh animated movie. I really liked it when it first came out. Now, eventually, as we all know, Frozen went on to become a phenomenon, not just a surprisingly good Disney animated film that had good word of mouth. That's how it started. Eventually, it permeated the culture to like critical mass. It became the highest grossing animated film of all time up until it was dethroned by the Lion King remake just this past summer. So I don't predict Frozen 2 will surpass its predecessor at the box office. Now, the signs to it are looking good. I mean, this thing is crushing at the box office right now. I think it's like already made 350 million worldwide. I don't know though, domestically, it's like on par. It's like, I think it's third or fourth at this point behind Incredibles 2, Finding Dory, and The Lion King. That's still incredible for a November film. As we've sort of talked about on the show before, these films that come out and during the holidays tend to have a lot of staying power at the box office. So Frozen 2 could very well go all the way into January and maybe go past the first Frozen. I don't know. Do you think that'll happen?
It's possible. I just don't know if it'll be as big of a success because it'll obviously cost more to make. So I don't know if it'll. Oh
yeah, I'm not sure about that either. Well, I'm wondering if there's going to be a drop off, right? Like everyone who wants to see this is going to see this, and I wonder if people are going to come back and rewatch it. I don't, because I think that's what happened to the first Frozen, and that's what really carried it to like not just $1 billion, but like 1.6 billion or whatever it was.
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to talk about that more once we get into our reactions for the film, but I don't know if it'll have the same staying power. It's hard to say.
All right. So you don't think it'll have permafrost, I guess, but yeah,
maybe not.
So all of that said, let's talk about the story. Frozen 2 picks up a few years or so after the original, and you can tell that the filmmakers have intentionally allowed the film to grow up a little bit, just like its audience. So it's been 6 years. So many of the ardent young fans of Frozen are now preteens and teens. So there's this YA young adult mythology feel that they've added. And I think rightfully so. I think that's a good idea because now the characters feel a little bit more mature. The plot is a bit darker. It's more complicated compared to the first one. The first film, it was kind of elementary I thought in a good way. It was very straightforward with the plot. We had, okay, these characters are going here and these ones are in trouble and there are these problems. And it wasn't complicated. That was something I liked about the first Frozen. That was something that some people thought was just like, kept it from really being great. I don't know. But this sequel has almost all the same people coming back. The main voice actors have all returned. Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck are back directing, and with Lee actually overseeing the screenplay. And just a side note, if you don't know, Jennifer Lee is now head of Disney Animation in place of John Lasseter. So there is sort of a difference there in terms of how this movie is coming about. The same songwriters are back, Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez. The movie even has the same release date, minus one single week. So it's just amazing how many things have sort of fallen into place for this to come back. The animation has improved quite a bit, as you'd expect. But I would say at least the art direction, like the look and feel of this movie is essentially the same. Like it's not that different. And I think that's fine because the first film was successful for a reason. If they had deviated too much, it probably would have been weird. But what's changed the most is the construction of the story. which involves more of an external threat on Arendelle, the fictional kingdom where our main characters live. Elsa, voiced by Idina Menzel, is still the queen of Arendelle, and she feels responsible for keeping everyone in it safe, and there's an accepted status quo where everyone seems to be doing just fine. Anna, voiced by Kristen Bell, she's quite content, kind of weirdly so, with being the younger, quirkier princess. She doesn't have a lot to do besides play charades with her sister and their friends, including her boyfriend, Kristoff, voiced by Jonathan Groff, who wants to propose to Anna, but he can't seem to find the right moment, right? And then Olaf the Snowman, voiced by Josh Gad, he has more of an existential bent to his character this time around. He's asking like deep philosophical questions all the time, and he's cracking a lot of jokes as usual. He's very improv in this film, just like the first one. You can sort of tell Josh Gad is riffing. And then Sven the reindeer, who is just, he's Sven the reindeer. There's not much of that character, I think purposely so. So not too far into the opening act, Elsa begins to hear a mysterious singing voice, and she concludes that it's related to a story about an enchanted forest told to her and Anna by their parents back when they were children. And all of a sudden, these elemental disasters begin to wreak havoc on Arendelle, forcing the citizens to evacuate. So Elsa and her amazing friends embark on what I like to call like an RPG video game quest. They got to find the forest and the ruins, and they have to learn the secrets of their past, and there are boss battles. It's that kind of plot. And for some reason, it all relates to about half a dozen plot points that for me just never coalesce. I have a lot of criticisms for Frozen 2, but my main one is simple. I just don't think this is a cohesive story with a whole lot to say beyond surface level ideas, of which I think are good. I think it has good ideas and it's the right ideas. But the preaching is, I think, superficial. I think it gets into all these various, very obvious platitudes, whereas the first film was clear in its message about identity and about letting go of the social restrictions on your identity. And it tied its thesis to character action and story beats. And Frozen 2, honestly, is a whole lot of characters talking about things and then doing other things that only sort of relate to their character growth. And by the end of it, which I won't give away, obviously, these characters, they make decisions that just don't have a solid basis in what's been set up. And even though the ideas are fine, and it's a good direction for the sequel on paper, this is just one of those films where I think the good intentions just never came together as intended. So I was massively disappointed by Frozen 2, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate way more than me because other aspects of it are entertaining enough. And I think people will get something out of it if they're looking for it. We'll probably talk about some of the things that we do like about Frozen 2 and some of the things we don't. But, well, Ashton, what about you? What is your take on Frozen 2? Do you think it's a perfect film, an A+? Where are you at?
No, not quite there. To kind of go off your earlier point, like I like Frozen 1. I saw it in theaters, I think like a week or so after it came out. I don't know if I had quite the same memorable experience that you had with it, but I remember seeing it with Matt Serafini, my co-host on A Ogre Tits Ogre, and I think we
Great
both
friend
enjoyed
of the show.
it. Yeah, friend of the show as well. He'll be at Thanksgiving at Olive Garden with us, I'm sure.
Matt, why are you ordering the soup? You never order the soup at Olive Garden.
Don't fill up on the soup. The endless possible is coming up just any minute now. Anyway, I'm sure he'll get a kick out of that once he hears this. But yeah, I like Frozen 1. I was a little taken aback, I guess, like Disney and a few others when it became such a huge cultural hit. Because I think, like you were alluding to, like I remember thinking, like, yeah, it's good. Like I didn't think it was like Tangled. I didn't think it was as good as Moana later. But I thought it was, solid, like a firm, like B level Disney movie, like not like top tier. I still feel like it just feels like it was like a 2D animated film that got put into 3D animation. Mm-hmm. I never quite felt like that movie found its balance and its look. And
did you like the music?
No, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. But I mean, I think the main thing that really worked for me was like the soundtrack was very good. The voice performances were stellar. I don't know. I mean, I will say though that like something that really stood out to me rewatching Frozen 1 was that, I mean, I think Let It Go is like a good song, but it's like, I think it's mainly Idina Menzel's performance, like her powerhouse singing that really makes it great.
Mm-hmm. She bring it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like quite like the songwriting per se. It's like, I think it's like Idina Menzel that like really makes it like the song that is now. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good film. Like you said, a little subversive, a little formulaic, but ultimately charming as far as what it's doing, its intent. And with Frozen 2, I really didn't have that many expectations going in. Like I just kept forgetting it was coming out. I was just like, oh yeah, there's Frozen 2 coming out. And then like, I wasn't really hearing a lot of buzz for it, but it doesn't surprise me that it's doing really well because, like, obviously Frozen 1 was such a phenomenon.
Yeah. It's an easy sell for like families. My sister took her two girls like opening night.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the equivalent, I guess, to like Aladdin for us. Like it was just like this like huge like hit, and then like they like really are just hoping to make as much money out of it as possible. And instead of it getting like a direct to video sequel like we got for Aladdin with Dan Castellaneta playing Olaf, the guy everyone back, which
Oh my gosh.
it's nice. And I agree with you. The animation's better. I do like that they are trying to strive for something a little more complex. It's not like the same story all over again. But I agree with you ultimately in that, like, I just don't really think it comes together in a very meaningful or particularly cohesive way. Not to say parts of it don't work. I mean, I think there is a noted attempt to kind of ground it in more maturity, which I found intriguing. I do think the animation in the right moments is really good. I think definitely compared to the first one, the animation stands out a lot. But yeah, it just feels like they have like all these different ideas that they want to do. Like they had like, we have to do something like, obviously Anna is like our main character, so we're going to focus on her and Kristoff. But it's like, but we have to make sure Elsa's like as much of a presence because that's what everyone loves. And it's like, well, we got to make sure Olaf does a lot of stuff too. And it's like, well, we got to bring in this stuff here. And it just feels like all these like different ideas that were like boardroom pitched. And it just never really quite clicked into something that felt like a really cohesive, well put together movie. It just feels like all these different ideas that just kind of ultimately were thrown together and just like, yeah, it's close enough. But yeah, I don't really have as strong a negative feelings as you do. I found it myself kind of more indifferent to it than anything. Like I admire what it's trying to do. I do think there are some good ideas at play here. Though I do have some criticisms with the like last act. I don't know if we have to get into the spoilers to discuss it, but
We might have to do a spoiler warning at some point just to kind of cover it because it's probably my biggest criticism of the film.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, I guess overall, like you said, like you have much more, I think, pointed criticisms of it. I'm just kind of more general, like, yeah, that wasn't quite as good as the first one.
So it didn't move you. And I guess I have a case for like, not only, I think provoking a reaction is one thing. I think it's actually worse to be indifferent to a movie, right?
Sure.
Like at least this movie made me think about how much I didn't like it. And a lot of it's rooted in a disappointment because I was close to liking it. That's the problem. And like, I wanted to so badly like this because again, the ideas are good. I think the sense of humor in this is good. Did you think it was funny? I was laughing.
I don't really remember laughing a lot. Just at like Olaf stuff.
I laughed. Yeah, it was the Olaf stuff. There wasn't much else. I thought the focus on Elsa and Anna as sisters and being like the emphasis on the relationship, I think was smart. It was like that's what you should do. That's what people like about the first one. And I think in their pursuit to be like, well, that means we can't have a villain because you don't need a villain. It's just about these two sisters.
Yeah,
but then
which
the direction they ended up going in from there then was all the Elsa stuff I thought was thrilling. It was interesting, just like the first film, where I was like, man, this person is like such a fascinating character, and she gets like two showstoppers. She, well, we can talk about the soundtrack too, but I don't think they're as like earwormy as Let It Go or two songs. They aren't, but it is more of like a Broadway feel where the music doesn't feel like it's supposed to capture your attention in the same way, which I was a little disappointed because I like a lot of the songs in the first film. I think that they're really good at like telling the story. Like Love is an Open Door is such a good way to get across to sell the like quick relationship between Anna and Hans. And when you rewatch that film, that song is even better because you're able to like work it into what Hans is actually trying to do. But there's nothing really like that in this movie where it really is just sort of like the characters pontificating about stuff, not advancing the plot, with maybe the exception of like one or two songs. And they just end up not being as memorable. I think that's why they're not as memorable. It's not because they're not as good, like structurally. I just think that they just aren't powerful songs narratively. So they're fine. Like Kristoff gets his power ballad that it's like a goofy little thing. And I like the idea of like Kristoff like getting a like I have a lot of feelings right now song. Like that's kind of nice because he didn't get a song in the last one. And I think it's a positive message for young men to be like, it's okay to like be disappointed and to feel like things aren't working out. And that, when you really like someone, but it feels like they're so far away. I thought that was actually something that was kind of nice, but that was the closest thing to a narratively satisfying song that I got. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, that was the main thing for me, was that, like, like that first movie, even though I don't love it, like, I can think, like, off the top of my head, I can think of, like, 5 songs from that, like, right off the bat, and it's just, like, that movie has so many memorable tunes, whether it's connected to a narrative or they're just catchier or just, like you said, more earwormy songs. It just, that, like, I felt like was more distinctive as a musical, whereas this one, like, I admire what they were trying to do as far as like making the songs a little more seeped into the narrative. But yeah, I just, like, with the exception of like the Unknown song and, like you said, maybe the Kristoff song, like I vaguely remember them. The rest I couldn't, like, I know that there's like an Olaf song. I don't remember at all how it goes. I know Anna had some
it's
songs.
like
I don't remember how they go.
This will all make sense when I'm older, which is like, here's the basic conceit of that song is like Olaf is like walking through a bunch of cartoonish peril and his song is about being smarter, but that is not as satisfying as his song about summer, which is explaining his character and it's telling you more about who he is. Whereas this one,
it's funny, like good animation, that, like, kind of like contradictory images and stuff. It just, like, yeah, and Summer's just a much better song, I think, than this. Or just like, I don't know, I just don't remember
they're
it all. Like, I remember him
inconsequential.
singing. Yeah, it just feels like, oh, we need to have Olaf have a song. Like, people are going to expect Olaf to sing because it's Josh Gad, so it's like, give him a song. And,
right, yeah, and then Elsa's Into the Unknown song. If you really piece apart that one, where she's just belting out Into the Unknown 3 times, and it's just like escalating. And there was something about that I was just, that felt to me like it wasn't reaching for something, like it was just trying to be catchy in that way, right? Like, it was trying to get into your head without doing the work.
Yeah, it was a noted attempt to make it another Let It Go, I guess. Like, it just, I don't know, I guess a lot of these decisions just feel very calculated to me in a way that the first movie, I'm sure it was calculated in some respects, but it felt more organic to what the story was and how they could connect to the stories and the characters. And this one, it just feels like, well, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to have this, we need to make sure that gets in there. And it's just, I don't know, it just feels like a very almost cynical effort from Disney. Like, we have to do this Frozen sequel because we want to make a lot of money for obvious reasons. And just the movie itself, I think, doesn't have the staying power that the original film has for that reason.
Yeah, I can hear you just getting choked up.
Yeah, it's just choked just getting so emotional with my difference with this movie.
Yeah. I think just to round out some of my criticisms, I mean, I think that I think, again, the stuff with Elsa, like I said, is good. It's thrilling, and like she gets a sequence with like a water horse that is just, it's good to watch. Like, that's the part of the movie where I think it actually works. But all of the stuff with Anna, I just found very strange, and I just didn't understand the conflict. Like, the conflict between her and Elsa is just that Anna doesn't have powers. She's not as exceptional, but the film never makes a case for how she can be exceptional in her own way. And it really is just like an over and over again of like Anna being like, I got to come with you. I got to be at your side. And Elsa's like, leave me alone. Like, I want to go off and do this really good movie over here. You can do your boring romance with Kristoff where you can't tell he's proposing to you. Isn't that original? Like, that to me was like the weakest material of the film. And that's the part of the film that needs to be good, is because Anna and Elsa are good characters. And the relationship between them should be more interesting, and there should be a better connection. But they just chose to do this, I think, kind of contrived conflict, because I think they were worried that if there was like a real conflict, like a real reason for them to be upset with each other, and like not in this movie where like they maybe have like a spat for 10 seconds and then they hug and it's all fine. And you're like, okay, like that's not a story. That's just kind of, that to me felt like trying to keep this like relationship from actually being interesting and more dynamic and harsh, because they're like, well, we can't have Anna and Elsa not like each other. People will hate that. That's what it felt like to me.
Kids will be confused. I don't know. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think you said a lot of the main things I want to say. It's just that, like, yeah, I mean, it's generally well made as far as like the animation, and I mean, I'm sure the songs are well produced in that regard, but I just don't really feel much of anything compared to the first one. It just feels like a kind of underwhelming effort in most respects. Like, even like the colors of it don't really, like, it's very muted visually, which I guess, makes some cool visuals at times, but it just seems like, my recollection of it's very murky looking.
That's why I don't understand like why people are calling this so gorgeous, and like okay, like the animation is good, but I did watch Klaus right before this movie, and it's so difficult to go from that, which is actually gorgeous. Like, if you look at that hand-drawn animation, that has color, it has texture and shadows, and like it actually has like a storybook feel, whereas like Frozen is so stiff and CG by comparison. Like to me, there's no comparison between the two films. And you can have a movie with beautiful animation like that. We have Pixar films and Moana, like you said, that obviously get that across in its own way. But yeah, Frozen is just cold, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I felt like the animation in the first movie was a little more stiff than this one, where I think it was a little more fluid. That's why I still think ultimately these movies would have been better if they were 2D animated, but that's, again, neither here nor there. But yeah, when I think back to the first movie, I think like a lot of like blue and white and like it just like very like stark, like very visually appealing. And this movie is just like gray, some green, like some white.
And the plot is also kind of, because it has all this stuff about like the darkness of the past and white guilt, and like the themes themselves are very muddled.
So yeah.
Well,
so
I don't think that's giving. Okay, that's not really giving anything away. I do want to say one last thing before we maybe like say a quick spoilery thing that people can skip ahead for, right? I want to say that I want to push back a little bit on this like campaign for people to be like, let Elsa be a lesbian, give her a girlfriend. And one thing I actually do kind of like is that she doesn't have to have a love interest. By all means, let's have a Disney film with like LGBTQ characters. I think that's like welcome, and I think that's great for this generation. But I think that Elsa so far has just been a character where she seems like she doesn't need a love interest, at least not right now. Like I just never have felt the need of like, well, what's her love story about? I think she's more interesting like who she is and figuring out who she is without needing somebody else to complete her story. That's how I felt personally. And because I think we already have so many love stories, but I do understand why people are like, well, this is the chance, because with this character, you can actually do that in a way that probably would fit. So I'm not like 100% opposed to it, but right now, personally, I think she works really well without a love interest and is able to just sort of represent that more independent, like it's okay to not have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You could just sort of be yourself. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that overall. I mean, I guess you could always go the Beauty and the Beast route where she dances with a woman for 15 seconds.
And gives them a look.
Yeah.
You know what that look means, kids.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember like how much I was hyped.
15 seconons. It's like 15
it was just so
milliseconds.
hyped. Yeah, it was like hyped up so much in that Beauty and the Beast movie. And it's just like, yeah, he danced with a guy. Yeah. That was it.
Yeah, and I think that's coming. I think Disney is bound to finally break that glass ceiling, but hasn't come.
I
yet.
mean, I don't want to speculate, but from what I've been told, like it's like some conflict with like I guess like the Chinese market doesn't accept many or any LGBT movies, and I guess they're trying to, I don't know, I guess they know like China's a big market for their movies, and they don't want to lose money, but it's also like they obviously want to be more progressive in their themes. That's what I've heard is a reason.
I'm more cynical to the sense where I don't think they want to do it because it's the right thing to do. I think they want to do it just in order to get brownie points.
Yeah, I mean
that's really what it comes down to. Yeah,
I mean, is that like the theme of that video? Woke Disney, or I still need to watch it.
The Lindsay Ellis one. We've mentioned that before. She does bring that up. You're right.
Okay.
But and I know Movie Bob has talked about this before, and like it's pretty well known in the industry that that's kind of the case. But regardless, that's where I'm at with this film. I just think it's kind of a confused movie, and I'm just really annoyed that it wasn't better. And I think that's why I'm not as indifferent. I'm a little bit more of like indignated just at how like it let me down, and that's probably more of a personal issue on my part. I feel bad because there are a lot of people really getting a lot out of this. I'm confused by it. I don't understand what people are seeing in it, but I'm glad it's working for some people to the extent that it is, because I do appreciate like films that have women at the forefront, women at the center being successful, because it can just dispel this notion that we can't get more.
Behind the camera too, right? Jennifer Lee's the screenwriter and co-director. Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to do a quick spoiler thing about the ending?
Sure. Yeah, we could talk about it.
Okay. If you don't want to be spoiled on Frozen 2, skip ahead to our next review. You can find it in the timestamps, or you can skip ahead like 2 minutes. This shouldn't take long. So, with that, let's we're gonna say something about Frozen 2, sort of toward the end. What is it you want to bring up, Will?
Well, I mean, I didn't know if it was a spoiler or not. That's why I didn't want to bring it up per se, but you kind of did already. Is that so the movie generally, roundabout speaking, is about white guilt, at least in some respects, which I think
Yeah.
is certainly an intriguing idea for a Disney movie. It's not something I expected them to tackle.
Over the course of this movie, they find out they have Native American ancestry, basically, and
Yeah.
it's such a weird thing. Like it's so
Yeah.
like it's one of those things where it's so contrived to be like, oh, they're half indigenous, and I'm like, seriously, that's how you're going with this? Like,
Yeah.
there was just something that felt so dishonest to me about that,
Right.
and so like not actually reckoning with white guilt in the way that the text is saying that it cares about. That's why I was saying before, like I like the ideas here, but the execution I think is way off. And then the whole thing where like we have to destroy Arendelle to save it, and then but it's
Yeah.
saved anyway. I'm just like, all right, that's not a story. That's just studio notes to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was trying to say earlier. And that's just like I think that message is an intriguing one, but just handled so clumsily. Like, I mean, maybe you'll disagree with this, but it just feels like the way it's handled with Elsa feels very white savory by the end.
Yeah.
And that like,
And
it's
they
like
make
literally,
all
like,
the
this-
decisions for
yeah.
that tribe. The tribe
Right.
has no agency.
Exactly.
The tribe
That's what I
has
mean, yeah.
like
Yeah.
all of these decisions get made for them. Like apparently this dam was supposed to be something that helped them, but then
Right.
they destroyed. Like Anna unilaterally decides she's going to completely destroy it, and
Yeah.
like without consulting with anybody. And I'm just like, oh my word, like this is, oh my
Yeah.
word, like it's just not told in a way that I thought was made sense. Like that's what I meant by it. Is like it's not cohesive. Like these actions don't follow with that has nothing to do with the conflict between her and Elsa. Like if the conflict was like, oh, I don't have agency as a character, then I don't know. That's all I have to say. I don't want to belabor it.
Yeah, I mean, like thinking back on Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is a film I was similarly kind of mixed on, but I think I gave that one B minus just because I do think, by and large, I think they handled the toxic masculinity angle fairly well in a way that I felt was impacting and interesting. And this movie, like I want to give it the same credit for it tackling white guilt, but just like you said, it's so clumsy and awkwardly handled that it's like you can't even really give the movie credit for that. At least I can't.
That's it. That's it for spoilers then. All right, let's get into our final thoughts and our grades. I think we've already covered our final thoughts. Let's just grade it. For me, it's a C plus. Which that probably sounds strange because I sound more negative.
Yeah,
I think it's because
I
I'm
thought
really,
you were gonna.
well, I'm fixated more on the negatives here because I'm upset.
Sure.
But again, there is funny stuff in here, and I think it's competently made, and I do think that it is a film that represents good things. And there are things I liked in it for sure. There's just the negative stuff stood out to me more, but I don't want to act like it's some sort of like offensively bad film. You know, maybe I'm grading it on a curve. I don't know, but a C plus feels right to me right now.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I gave it a C plus. Yeah, I guess I'm more indifferent just because I didn't really have a super strong relationship to the first movie. Like I said, I liked it. I thought it was a good film. I enjoyed the characters and the songs and the story and the subversion that they're going for. But this one just felt like a bit of missed opportunity for me. It was like some noble ideas, some interesting concepts, but overall they felt a little jumbled and, as you've said already, kind of incohesive and clumsy. And so, yeah, with that, I'll give it a C plus.
It's a bummer we couldn't have somebody on who liked the film more because I know there are plenty of them out there. So if you're interested in a more positive review of Frozen 2, there's plenty. We're definitely a little bit, I don't want to say outliers again, but we're definitely of an opinion that I don't think is universal or the consensus, right? This film has I think it has a good cinema score. And like we said, it's made all of this money. I think it's Rotten Tomatoes is like 80% or something like that. We shouldn't act like it's some sort of like terrible film and everybody agrees. So that's not the case.